Number 15. The emergency broadcast that wasn't a test. The 1977 Vrillon interruption. On the evening of November 26, 1977, viewers in southern England tuning in to Southern Television's local news were met with a sudden buzzing sound. Then, the broadcast glitched, and something unexpected replaced it.
These include stopping the execution of all captured prisoners of war. Negotiation.
This is the voice of the representative of the National Galactic speaking to you. For many years you have seen us as lights and sparkles.
Initially, many assumed it was a prank, but investigations revealed something stranger. The signal hadn't been altered at the studio. It had been intercepted at the transmitter level. This required advanced knowledge of broadcasting technology, not something just anyone could do. No individual or group ever claimed responsibility. The event was never officially explained. Though labeled a hoax in the press, no concrete evidence supported that conclusion. The identity of the speaker remains unknown. Some believe it was a technical experiment, others think it was something far less explainable. Either way, the interruption was real. The broadcast went out, and no one, to this day, knows how or why. Number 14. Project Blue Book. UFO files once labeled fiction. For years, strange lights in the sky were written off as imagination. Government officials would smile politely and explain them away as weather balloons, airplanes, or natural events. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening. In 1952, the United States Air Force launched Project Blue Book, a secret investigation into reports of unidentified aerial phenomena. The public was told the project was routine, just collecting data. What wasn't shared was the scale. Over 12,000 cases were documented. Hundreds of them were never explained. Decades passed, and most people believed the project had found nothing unusual. The files were locked. The topic faded from serious discussion. Then, in 2015, something changed. The US government quietly began releasing documents that confirmed the project was real, and that not everything had a clear explanation. Suddenly, cases that had once been dismissed took on new weight. Fighter pilots had chased objects that moved faster than any known aircraft. Trained observers described craft changing direction without slowing down. These weren't blurry photos from hobbyists. They were official records, and they raised serious questions. TV shows like The X-Files and documentaries had long hinted at government knowledge of strange events. Many thought these stories were just good entertainment, but they were drawing from real files, many of which came from Project Blue Book itself. One case involved multiple witnesses seeing an object hover, change shape, then vanish. Another described an incident near a military base where communication systems were disrupted during a sighting. These weren't stories from one or two people. They involved entire crews, sometimes even radar confirmation. Even after Project Blue Book was officially shut down in 1969, interest didn't go away. In fact, it only grew. Shows and films kept referencing it, sometimes with details that hadn't been made public yet. People began to wonder, how did screenwriters know so much? Were they guessing, or were they being advised? Years later, it became clear that some entertainment productions had access to technical consultants who were former military. That connection only fueled more speculation. Had the truth been hidden in plain sight all along? Project Blue Book may have ended, but its impact still echoes through pop culture. It reminded viewers that sometimes the strangest stories come from official sources, and what's labeled fiction today might be tomorrow's headline. Number 13. Operation Mockingbird. Journalists or agents. For most people, the news is a source of truth. Reporters gather facts, editors shape the story, and audiences rely on them to stay informed. But during the Cold War, something unusual was happening behind the scenes. Some reporters weren't just telling the story, they were part of it. The program was called Operation Mockingbird. It started in the late 1940s as an effort by US intelligence to influence both foreign and domestic media. At first, it was meant to counter propaganda from rival nations, but over time, it became much more than that. Through declassified files and congressional hearings, it was revealed that certain journalists were secretly working with intelligence agencies. They were writing stories, shaping narratives, and sometimes even traveling overseas on government-funded assignments. These weren't fringe theories. They were confirmed by real investigations in the 1970s. Major networks and newspapers were involved. Some of the most trusted names in media were either knowingly or unknowingly connected to government efforts to steer public opinion. When these connections were exposed, it created a wave of doubt. Who was telling the truth and who was delivering a message? The idea that a reporter might also be an agent wasn't something most people wanted to believe. TV shows and films started referencing these ideas. Characters based on journalists were shown uncovering deep government secrets, but sometimes they were also portrayed as part of the system they claimed to expose. Viewers began to ask difficult questions. If reporters could be used to shape opinion during a tense political time, could it happen again? Could it be happening now? While the official version of Operation Mockingbird was said to have ended, some critics argued that the lines between journalism and influence had already blurred too much. One of the most chilling parts of the program was how quietly it operated. There were no public announcements, no obvious signs, just stories that reached the audience and changed how people thought. That's the kind of influence most organizations can only dream of. Years later, documentaries and interviews with former operatives confirmed the program's existence. Some spoke openly, others only hinted, but the message was clear. Not all news was neutral, and sometimes the truth was edited before it ever reached the screen. Operation Mockingbird left behind more than documents. It left behind a question that still lingers. How much of what we see is really the full story? It's a running joke that The Simpsons seems to predict the future. For decades, fans have pointed out strange coincidences between events on the show and things that happen years later. But some of these moments feel too accurate to be ignored. One of the most talked about examples is an episode from the year 2000. In it, Lisa becomes president after President Trump. At the time, it was just a joke, a silly line that didn't mean much. But when that scenario actually happened, viewers looked back and started noticing more. Another moment showed smartwatches years before they became common. An earlier episode featured a concert with holograms, long before that technology was real. There was even a moment where a character holds up a chart that closely matches an actual stock performance chart from years later. People started asking, how could one animated show get so many things right? Was it just a coincidence, or was something else going on behind the scenes? The writers of The Simpsons have explained some of it. They say they follow trends and push them to the extreme. If a new technology is developing, they imagine what it might look like if it became part of everyday life. That kind of thinking can sometimes land close to reality, but there's more to consider. The show has always had access to clever minds. Comedians, scientists, and even futurists have worked on episodes. And when you write hundreds of stories about the future, a few are bound to land close to the mark. Still, some predictions go beyond just good guessing. In one episode, a voting machine switches a vote from one candidate to another. That same issue appeared in a real-life election. Another moment showed the exact layout of a famous building years before photos of it were released to the public. These things add up. Maybe it's not a single prediction that stands out, but the pattern. Viewers started creating long lists of these moments. Entire video essays and articles were made about how The Simpsons might be more than just satire. So, is it just sharp writing and coincidence? Or has the longest-running animated show tapped into something deeper about how the world works? Either way, the predictions are real, and they've made people wonder just how far fiction can go before it starts looking a lot like fact. Number 11. The TV that knew too much. Number stations hidden in shows. For decades, people have tuned in to strange radio broadcasts called number stations. These signals, often heard on shortwave frequencies, repeat strings of numbers or odd sounds. Most believe they were used to send coded messages to spies. But here's the twist. Some researchers claim similar transmissions appeared on TV. In the early 1990s, reports surfaced about strange interruptions on late-night channels in parts of Eastern Europe and North America. These weren't full hijackings like other famous cases. Instead, people noticed brief flashes during test patterns or silent broadcast hours. Some were just beeps, others were short numbers, read aloud in monotone voices. But the message didn't match any scheduled content. At first, this was written off as broadcast noise or leftover signals, but amateur radio experts started noticing patterns. Some clips appeared in the background of local access shows or test cards. A few even turned up inside the audio mix of public service programs, faint but present. The odd part, these weren't part of any known TV production. When digital TV became more common, the interruptions didn't go away. They just got harder to find. Forums sprang up where people posted clips and audio. Some even tracked time codes, trying to decode what they heard. And while there's never been an official explanation, one thing is clear: these weren't accidents. The theory is that old TV channels may have been used as cover for short-range data transmissions. Others think intelligence agencies repurposed unused signals during off-air hours. If that's true, it means the TV sitting in your living room may have once doubled as a relay station. This idea wasn't entirely fiction either. Shows like Fringe and The Americans hinted at this kind of activity. Characters used ordinary household devices to receive strange coded messages. These stories blurred the line between what was possible and what was already happening. The creepiest part, some of these TV number stations weren't just background noise. A few were tied to unexplained patterns, including symbols shown on screen and audio that matched confirmed spy broadcasts. Still, no network ever claimed responsibility. It might sound like a spy movie plot, but the evidence is hard to ignore. Old TVs weren't just for cartoons and late-night news. For some, they may have been secret listening posts, broadcasting more than anyone realized, right into people's homes. Number 10. The Ghost in the Studio, BBC's Ghostwatch Panic. On Halloween night in 1992, the BBC aired a special broadcast called Ghostwatch. It was presented as a live investigation of a haunted house. Viewers were told that reporters and scientists were exploring a real paranormal case in real time. What they didn't know was that everything was scripted and things quickly spiraled out of control. The show followed a family who claimed to be haunted by a spirit named Pipes. Cameras were set up in their home, and hosts interacted with callers who shared their own spooky experiences. The show used real news presenters and familiar BBC faces, which made it feel even more authentic. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but as the night went on, the mood changed. Strange things started happening on screen. Viewers claimed they saw figures standing in the background, only to vanish when rewound. Callers flooded the station, believing something had gone terribly wrong. The broadcast was convincing, so convincing in fact, that thousands of people thought it was real. Panic spread. Some believed the BBC had unleashed a real supernatural force. Others thought something had gone wrong during the live feed. In truth, the entire thing had been filmed weeks earlier, but the damage was already done. The BBC received more than 30,000 calls that night. Some people complained of nightmares. Others were simply confused. The show had warned viewers it was fictional, but that warning was brief and easily missed. After the backlash, Ghostwatch was never aired again on British TV. It became one of the most controversial broadcasts in BBC history. Years later, media scholars began studying the event. They saw it as a turning point in how television could blur the line between fiction and reality. It wasn't just a scary show, it was a lesson in trust. When real news anchors and a trusted network stage something so convincingly, how can viewers tell what's real? Ghostwatch inspired future shows like Paranormal Activity and The Blair Witch Project, which used the same found footage and realistic style. But it also became a cautionary tale. Too much realism, without context, can shake public trust. The haunting didn't come from ghosts, it came from the broadcast itself. A scripted TV special had caused real-world fear, and for many, That was the scariest part of all. Number 9. Hollywood's deepfake origins, the predictive power of early CGI. Today, deepfakes are a major concern. With just a few tools, someone can make a video of a person saying or doing something they never did. But long before the term deepfake existed, Hollywood was already exploring this idea. And strangely, TV shows and films predicted its rise with uncanny accuracy. Back in the early 1990s, CGI was still new. Movies like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2 pushed the limits of visual effects. But one lesser-known moment came from a 1993 science fiction show called Sequest, DSV. In one episode, a character used digital editing to fake a news broadcast. It looked slightly clunky, but the message was clear. Video could be altered to fool millions. Around the same time, another show called Max Headroom featured a digital character created to host news and entertainment segments. While the character was obviously fake, it raised a question. What if future hosts weren't real? What if they were entirely computer-generated? These ideas seemed like science fiction, but as technology advanced, reality caught up fast. By the late 2000s, visual effects had reached the point where digital doubles could be inserted into film scenes. Viewers couldn't always tell the difference. That level of realism started showing up in political satire, prank videos, and eventually real misinformation. In one surprising twist, a 1997 episode of The X-Files hinted that video footage could be fabricated to influence public opinion. At the time, this seemed like a clever plot point. Today, it feels more like a warning. Clips from the episode have resurfaced online, with viewers pointing out how accurate it turned out to be. The entertainment world didn't just imagine these changes. It demonstrated how they might be used. Writers and designers, working with early CGI tools, unknowingly forecasted what would become one of the internet's biggest concerns. Now, people regularly question the authenticity of what they see on screen. Was that speech real? Did that person really appear in that footage? The same questions that once made for good storytelling are now part of daily life. Looking back, it's clear that early television didn't just entertain. It glimpsed into a future where seeing isn't always believing, and where the tools used to tell stories might also be used to shape reality. Number 8. The TV Guide Code. Mysterious messages in listings. For many years, the TV Guide was just a booklet or scrolling screen showing what was on. It was routine, forgettable. But in the late 1980s and early 1990s, a strange rumor began spreading. Some listings contained secret codes. At first, it sounded silly. Why would anyone hide messages in a TV schedule? Then people started noticing odd patterns. Some show descriptions had repeated symbols or phrases that didn't make sense. Words like activate, red signal, or Unit 7 ready appeared next to harmless programs like weather reports or reruns. It didn't seem like a mistake, it seemed intentional. A few curious viewers began saving the pages and comparing them. They found that certain codes lined up with broadcast times across different cities. It was as if someone was using the listings to communicate across state lines. The theory gained traction when a whistleblower from a local affiliate hinted that broadcasters occasionally received special instructions that weren't meant for the public. These messages were coded, slipped into innocuous places to avoid detection. One former employee suggested that the guide may have been used by private contractors or monitoring stations during signal tests. While nothing was ever officially confirmed, multiple reports from the era show clear anomalies in listing data. These weren't just typos, they were repeated terms that appeared across unrelated stations. Researchers attempted to track the words and phrases, hoping to uncover a hidden system, but they couldn't crack the full meaning. Years later, tech forums and retro collectors would revisit this mystery. Some believed the TV guide codes were used to synchronize broadcasts or signal backup systems. Others thought they were a modern version of the old number stations, just hidden in plain sight. What made it even more mysterious was how these listings often vanished from later archives. Some copies, scanned into public libraries, no longer showed the strange phrases. Whether they were removed or simply replaced is unclear. But those who held on to the originals insisted the odd patterns were real. In a world where messages can be buried inside anything from songs to software, it's not hard to imagine that TV listings could have been used the same way, whether it was for fun, function, or something more secretive. The codes in the TV guide turned a boring tool into a possible channel for hidden communication. Number 7. The cancelled show that predicted too much. The Lone Gunman pilot. In March 2001, a little-known show called The Lone Gunman aired its pilot episode. It was a spin-off from The X-Files, focusing on 3 conspiracy-minded characters who used their tech skills to uncover hidden plots. The show had a small but loyal following. What shocked everyone later was what the first episode showed. The plot centered around a government faction planning to hijack a commercial plane. Their goal wasn't war, it was to crash the plane into a building in New York City, blame it on foreign enemies, and use the fear to launch a new agenda. In the episode, the plan is stopped just in time, but the imagery was clear. 6 months later, real events unfolded that mirrored the fictional script. Viewers who remembered the episode started bringing it up online. How could a TV show predict something so close to a major event? Was it just a terrible coincidence? Writers of the show were asked about it in later interviews. They explained that the idea came from general mistrust of shadow agencies, not any inside knowledge, but even they admitted it was unsettling. The timing, the accuracy, and the details were hard to ignore. This wasn't the only time a show seemed to touch too closely on real events. But The Lone Gunman stood out because it aired before anything happened. There were no clues in the news at the time, nothing that would suggest this exact scenario. That's why so many people still talk about it. The episode was pulled from reruns after the real-world tragedy. For years, it remained out of circulation, but those who saw it remembered. The show became a strange kind of artifact, a fictional warning that no one took seriously until it was too late. Over time, this single episode became the subject of documentaries and online analysis. It raised questions about creative intuition and the blurry line between fiction and foreshadowing. Can writers, by following patterns and imagining the worst, sometimes land too close to reality? In the end, The Lone Gunman was cancelled after 1 season, but its pilot remains one of the most talked about pieces of television from that era. Not because of ratings, not because of awards, but because it told a story too real, too early, and nobody saw it coming. Number 6. Subliminal ads on children's TV. For years, parents trusted that Saturday morning cartoons and after-school shows were harmless fun. Bright colors, catchy songs, and playful characters made it feel like a safe space. But behind some of those flashing images, researchers began finding something odd, hidden cues meant to influence behavior without anyone noticing. This practice is called subliminal messaging. It involves flashing images or playing sounds so quickly or softly that the conscious brain doesn't notice, but the subconscious might. While the idea had been around since the 1950s, it wasn't until the late 1980s and 1990s that serious attention turned to children's television. In one case, investigators found that a few animated shows were embedding single-frame flashes. Wasn't just a conspiracy theory either. A few networks were caught using audio layering, where messages were buried under music or background noise. If played normally, nothing seemed strange. But when slowed down, extra words or sounds could be heard, including instructions to buy, believe, or obey. Documentaries began covering these practices. One major example exposed how a popular 1990s cartoon included visual cues tied to a specific candy brand. Another revealed a recurring sound tone that made children feel anxious just before commercials aired. These tactics, once considered cutting-edge marketing, crossed ethical lines for many experts. Eventually, new laws were put in place to protect viewers, especially young ones. But some wonder how much slipped through before anyone noticed. How many children were influenced without ever knowing it? Number 5. The Mandela broadcast theory. Most people have heard of the Mandela effect, the idea that large groups of people remember something differently than it actually happened. It's named after Nelson Mandela because many people falsely remembered him passing away in the 1980s while he was still alive. But there's another layer to this theory, one tied to television. Some researchers and viewers believe that certain false memories come from altered broadcasts. The theory suggests that early TV signals, especially from the 1980s and 1990s, may have been manipulated, not to confuse people at the time, but to test how collective memory could be shaped through subtle changes. In short, the Mandela broadcast theory claims that reruns or news events were aired with small edits in different regions. A line of dialogue changed, a logo adjusted, a scene inserted or removed. These edits were so minor that most people wouldn't notice. But when they talked to others who remembered it differently, confusion set in. One common example is the children's cartoon title, Berenstain Bears. Many viewers insist it used to be spelled Berenstein. Some believe their memory is faulty. Others argue they saw it on TV spelled the other way. Another example is a famous quote from a movie being remembered wrong by large numbers of people. Was it misquoted, or had it aired differently? The theory grew legs when people began finding old VHS recordings with small differences. These weren't bootlegs, they were taped off television at home. One version would contain a scene or commercial, another wouldn't. At first, this seemed normal, but when key parts of dialogue or even logos were off, it raised questions. Was this due to early regional editing, syndication mistakes, or were shows being quietly tested to see how memory could be altered across a population? TV networks haven't commented directly on this theory, but some former broadcast workers have confirmed that localized edits were common. Announcers, credits, and even brief clips could be changed without alerting the public. It was done for pacing or content regulations. But what if it had deeper effects? The Mandela broadcast theory doesn't claim there was a massive cover-up. Instead, it suggests that shared memory might be more fragile than we think, and television, with its constant repetition and reach, may have played a part in shaping or even rewriting it. Number 4. The channel that didn't exist, UHF Channel 37. In the world of television, channels are carefully organized. Each number represents a frequency, and those frequencies are managed by national agencies. But there's one number that was quietly skipped, Channel 37. Most people never noticed, but those who did began to wonder why this spot on the dial seemed off-limits. In the United States, UHF Channel 37 was never used for regular television broadcasting. Try tuning to it and you'd get static. That might sound normal for an unused channel, but the reason behind it was anything but ordinary. It turns out that frequency wasn't simply left empty, it was reserved. Not for another show, not for a private company, but for deep space research. In the 1960s, astronomers asked the government to block out Channel 37 nationwide. The frequency it used, around 608 to 614 megahertz, was perfect for monitoring cosmic signals. Specifically, it allowed scientists to listen for natural radio waves from distant stars and galaxies. Any TV station using that frequency would create interference. So, the FCC agreed. Channel 37 became a ghost slot. That decision made sense to researchers, but as the years passed, the mystery grew. Why didn't most people know about this? Why did old TV guides still listed in some areas with no explanation? And why did rumors start spreading about strange signals being picked up on that channel in certain regions? Some late-night viewers reported static patterns that didn't seem random. Others claimed to hear rhythmic pulses or low tones buried beneath the noise. While there's no confirmed evidence of anything being secretly broadcast, those odd reports kept people guessing. It didn't help that science fiction shows occasionally used Channel 37 as a placeholder for mysterious broadcasts. Writers knew about the empty channel and used it to create eerie moments or secret transmissions. This only added fuel to the growing theories. Was Channel 37 really just a silent space for science, or had it ever been used for something else, something not listed in public records? The lack of clear answers made it feel even more hidden. To this day, Channel 37 remains off-limits for television. It's still protected by international agreements, and most people still don't know why it was skipped. That silence, on a device meant to speak has made it one of the strangest and most whispered about slots in broadcast history. Number 3. TV ratings boxes, surveillance beyond viewership. TV ratings boxes were introduced to answer one question: what are people actually watching? By placing small tracking devices in select homes, networks could measure which shows were popular and when viewers tuned in or out. These boxes helped decide which programs stayed and which ones were cancelled. But not everyone believed that was their only purpose. The boxes were part of the Nielsen system, which sampled a portion of households and extrapolated that data to represent national viewership. Most homes didn't have one, and those that did were often asked to keep quiet about it. At first, this made sense. If people knew they were being monitored, it might change their behavior. But over time, rumors began to spread. People who had Nielsen boxes said they noticed strange behavior. Some reported that the boxes kept working even when the TV was off. Others believed the microphones inside picked up more than just volume levels. Officially, Nielsen boxes were said to only track what channel was being watched, at what time, and for how long. But their advanced models included audio detection to identify commercials and background noise. Some researchers pointed out that this could easily be used to monitor conversations, whether intended or not. The speculation deepened when a former technician claimed that some boxes were modified to gather extra data. They didn't just track viewing, they logged voice, power cycles, and even remote control usage. Though never confirmed by the company, these claims caught the attention of privacy advocates. It didn't help that several conspiracy-themed TV episodes referenced similar ideas. In one, a character discovers that a ratings box in their home is secretly watching more than their viewing habits. In another, the box is tied to a hidden database tracking personal behavior. Some homeowners also reported receiving strange follow-up calls. A few claimed that representatives from the ratings agency seemed to know things they hadn't shared, like when they left the house or who had visited that day. One family said they unplugged their device only to be contacted the next day and asked why. A handful of technicians admitted anonymously that the devices could be remotely updated without homeowner knowledge. These updates supposedly improved signal collection, but some feared they enabled more than just technical changes. The lack of transparency made it hard to know for sure. While there's no public proof that ratings boxes were ever used for widespread surveillance, the possibility alone raised concern. In a time before smart TVs and internet tracking, these small devices were among the earliest ways companies entered people's homes digitally. What began as a tool for collecting show preferences quietly sparked deeper fears. Who was really watching, and what exactly were they learning? Today, most tracking is done through apps and connected devices. But the legacy of those early boxes remains. For some, they weren't just measuring TV shows. They were a symbol of how easy it is for everyday technology to blur the line between convenience and quiet observation. Number 2. The long pause. The night, the news, froze. Live news is supposed to be quick, reactive, and unscripted. Viewers expect smooth transitions between anchors, field reporters, and developing stories. But one night, in the late 1980s, a strange event unfolded on several local stations across the US. The news broadcast simply stopped. The screen didn't go black. The camera kept rolling. But the anchors froze, silent, staring forward for nearly a full minute. At first, people thought it was a technical issue. Maybe the teleprompter stopped working, but nothing else went wrong. The microphones were on, the studio lights stayed bright, the camera never cut away. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the show continued like normal. This wasn't just a one-time glitch. It happened in different regions, around the same time, on unrelated channels. Each instance followed the same eerie pattern: a long pause, no words, blank stares, and then a smooth return. No explanation was ever given, during or after. And strangely, recordings of the incidents became difficult to find. Some believed it was a pre-recorded segment accidentally played in place of live news. Others thought it was a test, either by a network or something more experimental. A few researchers claimed it matched the structure of a broadcast interruption test designed during Cold War planning. one that would freeze visuals while hidden messages or signal checks were carried out behind the scenes. There's even a theory that these pauses were used to measure viewer reaction. If a station could track how many people changed the channel during a silent broadcast, it might reveal useful data. Still, none of the networks involved ever confirmed this, and former staff members avoided discussing it entirely. Years later, internet forums began calling it the long pause. Viewers who remembered the moment described it as deeply unsettling. Something about seeing trusted faces frozen in silence, without context, left a lasting impact. Some said it felt like watching people being controlled. Others believed it hinted at something they weren't supposed to notice. Some amateur archivists began searching old VHS tapes, hoping to recover the footage. A few claimed to find partial clips, but the audio was often distorted or missing altogether. When one researcher tried to submit a recovered tape to a local station for analysis, it was never returned. The incident became more than just an anomaly. It became a legend among media historians. A former technician, speaking anonymously, once suggested that the pause may have been the result of a satellite feed override. When asked if that kind of override could happen without local staff knowing, the answer was simple. It could, and it did. While there's no confirmed explanation, the memory of that night lives on. It was a moment where time seemed to slow down, where reality inside the screen didn't quite match the one outside. And in a medium built on movement and noise, that kind of stillness became louder than anything else. Number 1. The show that changed a town, Dark Skies, and the cancelled investigation. In 1996, a short-lived television show called Dark Skies premiered in the US. It combined real historical events with science fiction, suggesting that alien contact had been covered up for decades. The show followed a young couple caught between government secrecy and otherworldly forces. While the series only lasted one season, something strange happened behind the scenes, and it didn't stay fiction for long. According to local reports, during the show's production, the writers conducted interviews and visited towns where real sightings had taken place. One such town was in rural Nevada, not far from classified government land. Residents there had long whispered about unusual lights, silent helicopters, and strange behavior from certain officials. These were the kinds of stories that inspired Dark Skies episodes. During their visit, the writers supposedly uncovered documents and testimonies that weren't part of any public archive. What made it even more unsettling was that some of the interviewees asked not to be named. They feared retaliation, not just for what they'd seen, but for what they knew. The writers went home, developed the season, and aired a few of the more controversial episodes. Not long after, production was quietly shut down. Officially, it was due to low ratings, but cast members and production staff later shared that there was pressure from unnamed sources to avoid certain topics. One writer hinted that they had been told to leave that town out of it going forward. Even stranger, some locals claimed that, after the show aired, activity in the area changed. Vehicles they didn't recognize started appearing at night. Local police began redirecting visitors away from specific roads. One person, who had been interviewed by the production team, said they were later contacted by someone who didn't identify themselves but advised them not to speak to the media again. Soon, rumors began to circulate online. Viewers who remembered the original airings noticed something odd. Certain episodes stopped appearing in syndication even though they hadn't been officially pulled. A few VHS copies surfaced with missing scenes. In some cases, characters referenced events from previous episodes that were no longer available. When fans reached out to the network for clarity, no explanation was given. The silence only deepened the mystery. Some independent researchers traced back production notes and found that several scripts had been revised at the last minute. Pages had been pulled or rewritten under direct supervision from external consultants. A handful of prop designers claimed they had been asked to destroy specific set pieces after filming wrapped. None of this was typical. The episodes that reference this town have never been officially edited, but reruns often skip them. Fans of the show noticed this pattern and started digging deeper. Some online groups collected old scripts, behind-the-scenes notes, and press clippings that seemed to support the claims. In the end, Dark Skies was just a TV show, but the ripple effects it caused went beyond the screen. It raised real questions about what can be safely explored in entertainment and what might still be off-limits. For one town and one series, the truth might have hit a little too close to home.